The sound of shattering glass echoed across Wellington Prep Academy's parking lot like a gunshot. Preston Blackwell stood triumphantly on the hood of a faded Honda Civic, his $200 baseball bat raised high above his head. The afternoon sun glinted off his perfectly styled blonde hair as he brought the bat down again, spiderwebbing the windshield while 200 students cheered and filmed with their phones. "You think you're better than me?" Preston snarled, his Letterman jacket worth more than the car he was destroying. Below him, Harper Collins stood perfectly still, her second-hand blazer from Goodwill a stark contrast to the designer clothes surrounding her. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her phone, but her eyes remained steady, focused on something the crowd couldn't see. "I only graded what you wrote, Preston," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the mob's laughter. The red recording light hidden in the car's rearview mirror blinked steadily, capturing every second of destruction. Harper glanced at her watch, 2:47 p.m. In exactly 3 minutes, everything would change. The crowd's energy was intoxicating, feeding Preston's ego as he performed for his audience. His live stream had already hit 5,000 viewers, the comments flooding in with fire emojis and laughing faces. This was Preston Blackwell in his element, untouchable, the son of Mayor Richard Blackwell, future Yale legacy, destroyer of anyone who dared challenge his authority. If this story makes your blood boil, you're not alone. Please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. And stick around, because the twist in this tale is something you'll never see coming. Harper Collins had been teaching history at Wellington Prep for exactly 2 months. She lived in a cramped apartment with her 72-year-old grandmother, drove this ancient Honda Civic that now served as Preston's stage, and committed the unforgivable sin of refusing to change his failing SAT prep grade for $50,000 cash. The offer had come through intermediaries at first, then directly from Mayor Blackwell's assistant, and finally from Preston himself, in a meeting that Harper had secretly recorded. "This is what happens when you don't play ball," Grayson Mitchell, Preston's longtime accomplice, shouted as he poured red paint across the car's hood. The crowd roared approval as he wrote "Fail this" in dripping letters across the driver's door. Harper pulled out her phone with steady hands, though everyone assumed she was calling for help. Instead, she dialed a number she'd memorized, but never used. "Code 7, she said quietly. "Asset compromised." The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. 15 minutes, stay visible. Preston jumped down from the car, landing with athletic grace that would have impressed his Yale recruiters. At 6'3", he towered over Harper's 5'4" frame, using every inch to intimidate. "7 teachers before you learned their place," he said, stepping close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with energy drink. "Mrs. Peterson lasted 3 weeks. Mr. Chen made it a whole month before he realized fighting back was pointless. But you?" He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You're going to learn today." The car wasn't much to look at, even before Preston's baseball bat intervention. A 1995 Honda Civic with faded blue paint, a cracked side mirror held on with duct tape, and over 300,000 miles on the odometer. But Harper's eyes lingered on details the crowd missed. The government format license plate partially obscured by mud, the professionally welded patches covering what looked suspiciously like old bullet holes, and the small black box under the driver's seat that had started blinking red the moment Preston's bat made contact. "You know what happened to the last teacher who refused to cooperate?" Preston asked, his voice carrying across the parking lot. The crowd grew quieter, sensing a darkness beneath the performance. "Chloe Winters. Remember her? Straight-A student. Full ride to Columbia." His smile was predatory. "She thought she was untouchable too. Until she wasn't. Several students shifted uncomfortably, remembering the girl who'd mysteriously withdrawn last year after reporting Preston for harassment. The official story was family problems. The whispered truth involved a suicide attempt after Preston's systematic destruction of her reputation. Harper's expression didn't change, but she made a mental note to add this confession to her growing file. For the past 6 weeks, she'd been meticulously documenting every threat, every bribe attempt, every instance of Preston's reign of terror. Her laptop contained encrypted folders with screenshots of threatening emails, audio recordings of intimidation attempts, and a detailed timeline of the Blackwell family's corruption. She'd even installed military-grade cameras in her classroom and car, technology that definitely wasn't available to civilian teachers on a $35,000 salary. The destruction continued as Preston's friends joined in. They slashed tires, kicked in doors, and smashed every window, while Preston narrated for his growing online audience. "This is what happens at Wellington Prep when you forget your place," he announced. "When scholarship charity cases think they can come here and disrupt the natural order." He didn't notice Harper quietly directing her phone's camera to capture the license plates of every student vehicle involved, or the way she positioned herself to ensure the school's security cameras had clear sightlines to the vandalism. What Preston really didn't notice was the small detail that would have changed everything. The parking permit on Harper's windshield wasn't the standard faculty sticker. It bore a serial number that, if anyone had bothered to check, would have traced back to a federal motor pool, the kind reserved for vehicles under special protection protocols. The kind given to families of fallen heroes who'd made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. By the time Preston finished his performance, the Honda Civic looked like it had been through a war zone. Glass littered the asphalt, paint dripped in abstract patterns, and smoke was beginning to rise from under the hood where someone had punctured the radiator. The crowd was reaching peak frenzy when Harper finally spoke again. "Are you finished?" she asked, her voice carrying a strange note of sadness rather than anger. Preston laughed. "Not even close. This was just your car. Wait until you see what happens to your job, your apartment, your whole pathetic life." Harper's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She glanced at it and allowed herself the first small smile since the destruction began. "Preston," she said, raising her voice so everyone could hear, "you just committed a federal crime." The crowd laughed, thinking she was bluffing. Preston rolled his eyes dramatically. "Federal crime? It's vandalism at worst. My dad will pay for your piece of crap car and this all goes away." But Harper wasn't looking at him anymore. She was watching the entrance to the parking lot where a very specific type of vehicle was about to appear. The live stream comments started shifting from celebration to confusion. Someone had noticed the unusual license plate format. Another viewer had zoomed in on the government inspection sticker. A third was asking why a beat-up Honda would have what looked like bulletproof glass remnants. Preston, lost in his own arrogance, continued threatening Harper with increasingly creative punishments for her defiance, unaware that his audience of thousands was about to witness his complete downfall. Harper's grandmother had begged her not to take this job. "That school is poison," the elderly woman had warned. "Those families own everything in this town. The police, the judges, even the hospital where I get my treatments." But Harper had insisted, driven by reasons she couldn't fully explain to her grandmother, reasons that had everything to do with the faded photograph she kept in her wallet of a man in a dark suit standing next to the President of the United States. The first sign of trouble in Preston's plan came when Officer Bobby Chen arrived. As the only honest cop in Wellington's police force, Chen had repeatedly refused to participate in the Blackwell family's schemes. He took one look at the destroyed car, the celebrating crowd, and Harper's calm demeanor, and immediately called for backup. Not local backup, but state police. "This is Officer Chen," he said into his radio. "I need state police assistance at Wellington Prep. Possible federal property damage in progress." Preston's confidence flickered for the first time. "Federal property? Are you insane?" He gestured at the wreckage. "Look at this heap. It's not worth $500. Officer Chen ignored him, focusing on Harper. "Ma'am, can you confirm the registration of this vehicle?" Harper pulled out a document from her bag, one she'd been carrying every day since taking this job. "The vehicle is registered to the United States Secret Service, asset number 74 Alpha 991, assigned to the Collins family under Executive Protection Directive 372. The parking lot fell silent except for the sound of hundreds of phones recording. Preston's face went from red to white as the implications hit him. But it was too late to run. In the distance, the distinctive sound of multiple vehicles approaching at high speed grew louder. Harper looked at her watch again. 3:02 p.m. Right on schedule. The red light in her car's remains blinked faster now, its signal reaching satellites and triggering protocols that had been dormant for years. "You might want to end your live stream," Harper suggested quietly to Preston. "What comes next shouldn't be entertainment." But Preston, in his panic, had forgotten about the thousands still watching. They would all witness what happened when someone attacked not just a teacher or a car, but a symbol of sacrifice that reached all the way to the White House. The Honda Civic might have been old, beaten, and now destroyed, but it had been given with a promise that was about to be kept in the most dramatic way possible. The first black SUV rounded the corner at precisely 3:03 p.m., followed by another, then another. By 3:05, Wellington Prep's parking lot looked like a scene from a Hollywood blockbuster. Federal agents in tactical gear emerged with practiced precision, creating a perimeter around the destroyed vehicle. Preston tried to back away, but found himself surrounded by students who suddenly wanted no part of his proximity. His live stream kept rolling, broadcasting his transformation from predator to prey to an audience that had grown to 15,000 viewers. Harper hadn't moved from her spot, standing with quiet dignity as chaos erupted around her. She thought of her father, of the last time she'd seen him alive, of the promise he'd made to always protect her. Thomas Collins had been many things: a devoted father, a loving husband, a protector of others. But above all, he'd been a man who believed in justice. The car he'd been given after saving the president's life had become more than transportation. It was a symbol, a reminder, a connection to a legacy of service. As the lead agent approached, Harper recognized him immediately. Special Agent Miller had been her father's partner, the man who'd delivered the news that changed her life forever. "Ms. Collins," he said formally, though his eyes held warmth, "I apologize for the delay. We had to verify the signal authenticity." He turned to survey the damage, his expression hardening. "This vehicle contains classified defensive technology. Its destruction constitutes an attack on federal property." Preston, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake, tried to speak, but only managed a strangled sound. The sophisticated security system Harper had installed throughout her apartment wasn't just paranoia. It was preparation. The same preparation that led her to back up every threatening email to encrypted servers, record every inappropriate conversation, document every instance of the Blackwell family's corruption. She'd learned from the best, after all. Her father had always said that in the face of systemic injustice, documentation was ammunition, and Harper had been building an arsenal since the day she arrived at Wellington Prep. "The vehicle's black box recorded everything," Agent Miller announced, loud enough for the crowd and cameras to hear, including conversations from the past 72 hours. Preston's friends began backing away as they remembered their detailed planning sessions in the parking lot, their discussions of previous victims, their jokes about untouchable privilege. The black box hadn't just recorded the destruction, it had captured evidence of a conspiracy that went far deeper than simple vandalism. Mayor Blackwell arrived in a fury of screeching tires and empty threats. "This is my town," he shouted, stepping out of his Mercedes. "You can't just come here and—" He stopped mid-sentence as Agent Miller held up a tablet showing footage from inside the Honda. There was Preston, clear as day, placing a package in the trunk 3 nights ago. A package that Harper had discovered, documented, and replaced with harmless baking soda. The same package that Preston had bragged about to his friends, claiming it would be the final nail in the annoying teacher's coffin. Harper's phone buzzed with another message. This one made her close her eyes briefly, centering herself for what came next. The real investigation was about to begin, not just into a destroyed car or planted drugs, but into a decade of corruption that had destroyed dozens of lives. Chloe Winters was just one name on a very long list. Teachers fired, students silenced, families driven from town when they refused to play by Blackwell rules. All of it meticulously documented in the servers Harper had been feeding information to for 6 months. "Harper Collins isn't just a teacher," Agent Miller announced, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "She's been working with federal authorities to investigate systematic corruption in the education system." He looked directly at Mayor Blackwell. "Your son didn't just vandalize a car. He destroyed evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. He tampered with a witness. He committed obstruction of justice." The mayor's face went from red to purple to a concerning shade of gray. The live stream comments exploded into chaos as viewers realized they were witnessing something far bigger than teenage vandalism. Preston's phone shook in his hand, still broadcasting to 20,000 viewers who couldn't look away. Agent Miller pulled out a tablet, swiping through files that made Mayor Blackwell step backward involuntarily. "Mr. Mayor, we have records of $50 million in misdirected education funds over the past decade. Would you like to explain where that money went?" Harper finally moved, walking slowly toward the destroyed Honda Civic. She knelt beside the wreckage, her fingers finding a hidden panel beneath what remained of the passenger door. Inside was a small metal box, scorched but intact. "This was my father's," she said quietly, though her words carried in the hushed parking lot. "Special Agent Thomas Collins. He installed this compartment himself, said it would survive anything." She opened it carefully, revealing a collection of items that made Agent Miller's expression soften. Inside were photographs, medals, and a letter with the presidential seal. Harper held up the letter so the cameras could see. "3 years ago, my father threw himself between the president and an assassin's bullets. He took 3 rounds meant for the commander-in-chief." Her voice remained steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. "The president visited him in the hospital, promised to take care of our family. This car was his personal gift, a symbol of gratitude from a grateful nation." Preston's legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees on the asphalt, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd done. But Harper wasn't finished. She pulled out a small recording device from the box, one that had been documenting every crime within a 100-foot radius for years. "My father knew about corruption in high places. He taught me to always be prepared. Always document everything." She looked directly at Mayor Blackwell. "Including the meeting you had with Judge Morrison about covering up Chloe Winters' case." The mayor tried to run, but FBI agents were already moving in. They'd been positioned around Wellington since Harper's Code 7 call, waiting for the signal to close the net. As handcuffs clicked around Richard Blackwell's wrists, Preston made one last desperate play. "She entrapped us!" he shouted at the cameras, This whole thing was a setup. But the footage didn't lie. Every threat, every crime, every moment of harassment had been Preston's choice. Harper stood up, brushing glass from her knees. "You want to know the truth, Preston? I came here to teach. That's all. I knew about your family's reputation, but I believed in giving everyone a chance." She gestured at the destroyed car. "You did this. You chose violence when I chose education. You chose intimidation when I offered fair grades. Every step of this was your decision." The federal investigation moved with stunning efficiency. Within hours, agents had seized computers from the mayor's office, the school administration, and dozens of co-conspirators. The live stream footage went viral, surpassing 10 million views as people watched the real-time collapse of a corrupt dynasty. Students who'd been silenced for years began speaking up, sending evidence to tip lines, sharing their stories on social media. Harper's laptop, which Preston had mockingly called outdated, connected to federal databases with encryption protocols that would have impressed cybersecurity experts. As she sat in the FBI mobile command unit, she pulled up file after file of evidence she'd compiled. The Blackwell family didn't just corrupt Wellington Prep, she explained to the lead investigator. They had a network spanning 3 counties: judges, police chiefs, school board members, even state legislators. By sunset, 17 arrests had been made. Preston Blackwell, still in shock, was processed for destruction of federal property, obstruction of justice, attempted evidence tampering, and conspiracy charges that would ensure he never saw Yale except in photographs. His father faced 25 years minimum for corruption, embezzlement, and racketeering. The family fortune, built on graft and intimidation, would be seized under federal asset forfeiture laws. But the most powerful moment came when Harper was escorted to a secure video conference room. On the screen appeared the President of the United States, the same man her father had saved. "Miss Collins," the President said, his voice heavy with emotion, "I heard about what happened today. Your father would be proud." Harper straightened, her teacher's blazer still dusty from the day's events. "He always said justice takes time, but arrives with certainty." The President nodded. "We failed to protect his car, but we won't fail to protect his daughter. Or his legacy." Wellington Prep would never be the same. Federal oversight replaced the old boys network. New teachers arrived, vetted and protected. The culture of fear that Preston had embodied crumbled as students realized that privilege couldn't override justice. Harper returned to teaching, now with a security detail that remained discreet but vigilant. Her Honda Civic was replaced with an identical model, this one truly bulletproof, a rolling reminder that some symbols are worth preserving. In the weeks that followed, Harper received thousands of letters from teachers across the country who'd faced similar harassment. Her story had sparked a movement, a recognition that educators deserved protection from the Preston Blackwells of the world. She answered every letter, building a network of support that would eventually become a national foundation for teacher safety. Preston's prison letters arrived monthly, each one showing a gradual understanding of his crimes. Harper read them, but never responded. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. She focused instead on her students, on teaching them that history's greatest lessons came not from textbooks, but from standing up to tyranny in all its forms. The restored Honda Civic sat in the school parking lot, now protected by federal statute. Students touched it for luck before exams, understanding it represented something larger than metal and glass. It was proof that justice, amoureuse, while sometimes slow, was inexorable. That courage didn't require superpowers, just conviction. that a teacher with a second-hand blazer could topple an empire built on fear. Harper kept teaching, kept documenting, kept preparing. Because Preston Blackwell wasn't unique. In schools across America, bullies with powerful parents terrorized those who couldn't fight back. But now they knew someone was watching. Someone was recording. Someone was ready to make that call that would bring their kingdoms crashing down. On quiet evenings, Harper would sit with her grandmother, sharing stories of her day. The elderly woman no longer feared for her granddaughter's safety. The federal protection was comprehensive, the corrupt network dismantled. But more than that, she saw in Harper the same steel that had made Thomas Collins a hero. Not the kind that sought glory, but the kind that simply refused to let injustice win. The last entry in Harper's journal was brief, but profound. Dad always said the hardest battles aren't fought with bullets, but with truth. Today, truth won. She closed the book and looked out her window at the lights of Wellington, now free from the Blackwell shadow. Tomorrow, she'd teach another history class, grade another paper, inspire another student. The Honda Civic, rebuilt and reinforced, waited in the driveway. 6 months later, Harper received an unexpected visitor. A young woman with familiar eyes stood at her classroom door. "I'm Chloe Winters," she said softly. "I heard about what you did, what you're still doing. I want to help." Harper smiled, gesturing to an empty desk. "Then, let's begin. Justice is a lesson that requires many teachers." But as Harper turned to write on the whiteboard, she noticed something that made her pause. An email notification on her phone from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "The Blackwells were small fish, interested in the ocean." She glanced at Chloe, then at the message, a small smile playing at her lips, as she deleted it without reading. For now. Looks like the Honda might need another road trip soon.